Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Ito parang sakacang dhammo sotapoti. I'd like to ask permission from Ajahn Amaro and all the Mahatheras, Theras, all the bhikkhus, Siladharas, all the lay guests gathered here to give a Dhamma talk on this occasion of tonight being the full moon day, where it's customary to practice the Dhamma and to listen to the Dhamma. So in Thai they call it one Dhamma Savanang, a day to listen to the Dhamma. And it's also one of the last days that I'm in the United Kingdom. I'll be leaving in 2 days. And this may be something very normal for most of us to be coming and going and to see ajahns or monks and nuns coming and going. But it does leave an impact on myself to find me in a situation of change again, after having been accustomed to living in the monasteries in England for more than half a year. I feel, like it's an interesting experience to go back to Thailand via India, which is quite a turbulent terrain, I would say. After having been up in Northumberland in Arunaratanagiri Monastery for a few months, admiring the simplicity of the surroundings, and now finding myself, instead of taking the power of the simplicity straight back to Thailand, in the monastery where I'm active, I have this episode of the turbulence of Mother India for a month in between. I can only say that I really appreciate the level of stability that we have in a conventional sense. And this is really helpful, even arriving in Northumberland, finding myself coming from a very intense period of monastic life, with all kinds of things happening, suddenly being dropped by an airplane in the middle of the fields and the open skies with sheep and cows. Nothing much more. A few bhikkhus assorted. Not even, 10% of the months, the amount of monks we had gathered for the various festival occasions now. And it's a strange experience. And then to reflect on these things and see, yes, ultimately there's always change, and there's nothing that we can hold on, and there's nothing that we can rely on. We know the teachings of the Buddha, and that is what the Buddha taught, and what we contemplate, what we try to realize. Yet on a daily basis, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have structures, to have conventions, to have actions which I feel assured by wise people are good actions, to have a sense of respect for other human beings that I can take as an example, for example. And for us as monks, nuns, and also the lay people acquainted with the forest monasteries to have a sense of Vinaya, or conventional reality that we can rely on. I find it's really important and really crucial, actually, in the path of the Buddha's teachings. It's not just something we can just simply dismiss and discard prematurely and say, never mind, I'm letting go, when we actually do need a sense of reaffirmation, a sense of feedback, a sense of something to make sense of, to understand and see. And the way we look at all the conventions and all the makeup of this world can be quite intricate and quite detailed. I think we've just chanted it, for example, Ularikang Sukumang Va, the 5 khandhas. If we train ourselves in watching just even the body, there's so many things that we can discover that are almost like news to us. Like in various situations, we can see new aspects and new facets and be amazed with, okay, this too is part of the phenomena around myself, around my body, around my life. So sometimes we have these very poignant experiences, like changing places, coming from Ubon Ratchathani to Hanam, or then after a due rest, going on to Chithurst and then Amaravati, and now going back to another very, say, complex conventional reality. But I do believe we get more and more skilled in making sense of it through using the Buddha's framework. And this is something I feel very important for our practice, for my practice, and to see how much we can make skillful use of conventions and skillful use of the framework in which we see life. Just even the Buddha's teachings as they are, like we spend so much time and effort and also very joyful, energetic exploration of what the terms that the Buddha taught actually mean and how they apply to each situation. For example, when we do the chanting, we revise the same topics over and over in a steady routine. And I wouldn't want to miss that. It's not that they suddenly become a fixed entity, but they become a framework for the practice to see what's happening. So I find that's very, very useful and beautiful also. And I feel particularly grateful in this world that's overwhelming to see spaces that the monks and nuns have created over time, where we have that stability and that point of reference. And I do believe that's the same for our lay practitioners that come and join the monastery for a certain amount of time, short time, long time. There's some of you that sometimes spend years or decades in close proximity to the monastery and enjoy that space where there's not the utter chaos, but there's only a little bit of chaos, just as much that we can make sense of it a little bit. And it's our exploration over time that we feel more confident in making sense of these things. Just even, thinking about the fact that when Luang Por Sumedho came here first, he was advised by Luang Por Chah just to keep the Vinaya, just to keep the conventions, keep the Kawat, as we would say. Kawat are the in-house rules that are definitely bound up with each and every particular monastery or group of monasteries. They're not universal standards. And the Vinaya even, there's so much discussion about how the Vinaya is really correct and so forth. And we all know that there's, like, of course, some tolerance and gray areas, but just in as a first approximation and as a basis for making sense of all these standards and ways and procedures, to start with, like keeping a template, keeping something that we have already and that there's already a bit of experience with. I think it's really a wonderful thing, and I can still feel at home now after how many years? 40 years of Amaravati. And also, yeah, like all the other monasteries, or even when we meet people that are practicing in a similar style, we can expand this familiarity to other areas. I'm sometimes very grateful when, I'm somewhere in, for example, in Germany, visiting my mother's house, and I meet the local vicar. Just the feeling of, oh, here's somebody who's got a scope of life that goes beyond the daily chaos. Somebody who has higher aspirations. Of course, different Vinaya, different rules, different ways of conduct, but just the feeling like to make a bit of a structure that I can orient myself in is very useful. So I'm very grateful that Lumpur Sumedho came here and didn't toss overboard the Vinaya and the Kawat Patibat, which of course, like it would be somehow like an intuitive reaction. How am I going to do this? And the stories, like we're so privileged to have Lumpur around the corner, and he many times talks about the conventions, the conditions, and also that interplay between different conditions, which I just experienced, like being like in Thailand for a decent chunk of time, and then suddenly finding myself in the United Kingdom, different kingdom, and just figuring out what's happening here and how do I relate to things. It's very interesting, and like I take joy in experiencing it, because like there's so much of these reference points that I feel are ingrained in us being monks and nuns and lay practitioners, or people that have heard the Buddha's teachings, and just that solidarity, I would say, it gives a sense of, like this is doable. I can change locations, go somewhere else, and not be completely scattered, and use the similar aspects of those conventions that I'm already deciphering in a different framework and try to apply. For example, my morning and evening chanting, I can do it in any place of the world and see what it does to myself and what comes up in my heart, in my mind. It's not something new. It's not a test balloon that goes up unexpectedly, but it's something that I have used over time, invested a lot of effort in making it meaningful for myself. And I sometimes pity people that don't have that point of reference. And this is a real sad story to see how many times people fall prone to that idea of anything goes, never mind, I just want to be free and do what I like. And then they end up shipwrecking in the chaos of the world. And going to see various people on my visit here, also friends and relatives from my own past, then sometimes, there's this emptiness of things that you can talk about, because the points of reference are very different. In the beginning, when I came, coming to Northumberland, I thought, actually no need to really explore too much. I was quite happy that it was a limited amount of new input, like the sheep and the trees. Actually, the trees are quite interesting how they change. Like I really remember Lumpur Sumedho talking about the seasons in the West. I haven't experienced seasons for over 20 years, and so that was fascinating. But that was good enough. And luckily, we didn't go too much to town. And also, luckily, in the last few days, I don't have to go to London. I'm quite happy about simply being here. I remember one time, as a monk or nun or lay practitioner, you usually you go for the sake of practice, like, and experience other monasteries, other retreats, and so forth. And then there's this thing that in Thai they call tiaos, which means like sightseeing trips. And I remember not really expecting that I would be traveling very much as a monk in Thailand. And for some reason, I developed some language skills and was able to join Luang Por Liam for a few trips. And some of them actually brought me here to Amaravati. The one that sticks out for me, because I never thought I'd be interested or like able to go, is to go to America. And usually for many, many people, that's great, go see America. And then San Francisco, I know Ajahn Amaro will just think it's quite boring to go to San Francisco, but most people are quite excited. And me going along with a person that I really respect for his attitude towards life and his whole being and relating to the world, Luang Por Liam, I felt like a bit copying the mode of like Luang Por Liam, like sitting in the car that took us through these, like, there's this kind of hills, it goes up and down, and cable car and whatnot. And our driver, one of the good souls of the monastery, which here we have equivalents, many long-term upasikas that work there and support the office. I know somebody here, for example, who's got her birthday today. So the equivalent, Debbie, she's called, she was driving us and was almost ambitious to explain how fascinating San Francisco was. And I just felt, oh, please, let's go back to the monastery. I didn't actually want to experience the fascinating life of a city like that. I felt this feeling of, actually, I've seen enough. I'm not making any claims. There may be other things that do interest me. But in this context, particularly with a teacher like Luang Por Liam, you just feel like this sense of, come on, let's cool down here. This is not so exciting. This is not so special. And after all, it's like, all these people walking up and down the streets, just the way they're dressed and the way their body language is, wow, this is quite something to figure out what it means and how to deal with it. Very far from what we do in the monastery, where we just kind of, even walking, we try to make no sound, we try to not be seen, not be heard, or so. Very, very beautiful. We sometimes whisper, actually, and then you got all this like loud life outside. So not to be overwhelmed and to use a framework that we can make sense of and use well, I think is very much supportive for the practice, because we can enrich our experience bit by bit. We don't take on the whole world at one time, but we take as much as we can digest bit by bit. And I think that's really interesting. I find that's doable, and it fits in with what the Buddha taught about, there's conventions, there's things that work on the level of doing good actions by body, speech, and mind, and apply oneself to things as the conventions like the Vinaya or other conventions which are more difficult to pin down, like, say, the conventions of a certain country, a certain culture, the way people greet each other, for example. We try to respect these and build up a sense of doing the right thing, doing something that's good, doing something that's wholesome with this practice of using the conventions. Of course, we start with very high ideas about the Buddha's teachings, and I'm also very grateful for Luang Por Sumedho, and of course also Luang Por Cha, Luang Por Liam, and all our forest ajahns and many other inspiring teachers that emphasize the highest teachings of the Buddha Dhamma. Things like letting go, freedom from suffering, no good, no bad, the ending of likes and dislikes, no excitement, and peace, and letting go, and emptiness, and things like that, of course. And this is the thing I feel is so nice, that we can actually from time to time make experiences in that conventional way of walking through this busy world, where we actually are taking little steps of letting go and little steps of not attaching too much identification or self or eagerness, keenness on that particular thing. And the framework that we need, of course, for each and every one of us is maybe different, and we have to figure it out by ourselves. We have to really apply ourselves in that sense, make sense of things, look at things in a refined way. And for that, we definitely need meditation. We need a sense of restraint, a sense of minimizing the impact to that level that we just about can manage without doing unwholesome things. And this is quite a beautiful teaching. We can be quite creative in finding the teachings in the little things that are laid out well in our life for ourselves and work with that and keep the big teachings alive in that context where, for example, we go to the temple here, we pay respects to the Buddha as an image, and we keep the image of the Buddha or the Buddha as the perfect teacher in our heart, in our feelings. And at the same time, we walk on the floor and find our little pitfalls here and there, and maybe realize that actually the place in which the Buddha is sitting is quite cold. We got to put on another scarf or something like that. We take care of these things, but it doesn't compromise with that feeling for connecting to the higher truths if we're skillful with it and do it gradually and bit by bit. And I think it's not just something that the monks and nuns do, it's also something that the upasakas and upasikas do regularly. When you take, for example, the 8 precepts, it's a matter of simplifying one's lives, just about to be able to manage things. There's the 5 precepts which are really already rare in the world, but we take it quite consistently, that we not only practice on the level of the general ethical conduct, which of course is like not lying, not stealing, not killing, and so forth, but we take it further to that sense of restraint and sense of not indulging or like getting diverted in nonsensical stuff, like, you know, all the things that people kill time with: entertainment, singing, dancing, music, which of course is meaningful in one way for each person, but many times it's just an outlet and a way of compensating for the frustration that we have. For example, eating. I can remember how much I was stuffing in when I was stressed as a student in Berlin, like basically cycling back home, trying to get in time somewhere and just quickly getting a pizza or some kind of whatever, Snickers bar or something like that. I don't know how much money I spent on junk food in between. So if we can just maybe kind of have a framework for that, even like saying, okay, after 12 o'clock, that's it. Or like, yeah, living with that idea. And well, there's even people that, you know, do this like consistently. Some people are actually really a good example for restraint that we feel then, say, wanting to emulate. Say, for me, and definitely Luang Por Liam is one of those that I feel like, wow, how minimal is his life. And or you may have others that you take as an inspiration when things get hard and it's not quite clear in the setup. One has to many times find a bit what works. Like there's things that are already laid out, like the 227 precepts or Siladhara precepts or the 8 precepts and so forth. But there's also a lot of things that aren't laid out, where we actually have to fine-tune what about works for us and how much shall we make a little bit of an effort to clarify what we actually want to do, and then stick to it for a while and build up a frame of reference and a base for our actions from there, and then see what happens. And how much can we actually just let things be and leave them to their own course. I think that's really very, very profound task to be able to orient oneself in life. How much do I have to kind of determine what framework I want to abide by, and how much can I just simply really let go and go, as it's so popular to say, go with the flow. And so I believe all of us have got quite a bit of experience in there, and I find it's a very valid experience for the practice. It's not just the amount of formal meditation and hardcore effort that one puts into certain postures or techniques, but it's much more the subtleties and the fine-tuning and working with the parameters. The other day we had some students coming from London, so actually I just said I'm not very interested in going to London, and I realized actually, yeah, come on, it's a bit much to understand all this, what's going on in the world, particularly now. It's so convoluted with lots of difficult things, and but I realized so many times when you actually meet a human being that who tells you what's happening to them in their context, I'm actually all ear. I'm actually okay with taking on a bit of the complexity and trying to understand what's life like for this person. And the students that came are very different personalities, obviously, like each and everyone is so unique anyway, and they had different outlooks on life, and they all had faith in the idea that the Buddha could give some guidance, and the question was a bit like, what should I do with this particular choice in life? Say, for example, shall I continue studying, or shall I just drop it and do something else? And it's so difficult to answer this if you're not in their life, really. All we can say is, look, build up your own capacity to see this. And if it gets too much, start with a little step of taking a step back and practicing a little bit, just to be alone, for example, not constantly answering other people's questions and going to some place or experiencing something new. Just have time for yourself. And they said that's why they came here. Actually, I felt really good about that. That we provide a place where people can come and just step back a bit. But then, of course, like, it's so complex. And then these days, there's so many people that don't have any reference anymore about like what's good and bad in life. I mean, it's exaggerated, please forgive me, but like it is like a bit more diverse these days, to see the conditions and the upbringing and the future and all these things. It's quite complex. And so I just cannot really say much other than, the three of you should take some time off and just step back and find time for yourself. And then one of them said, okay, I did that, but I had a bit of a nervous breakdown then. So this even happens in meditation. We have so many people coming to the monastery, even in Thailand, that are so overloaded with dukkha that then suddenly very unwished for side effects come up. And so then it's very difficult then to be even recommending silence to people, and to be, so to say, empty of duties. Sometimes even that is very difficult. What I use is chanting, and I like recitation. I just use the old truths of the Buddha and just take them in again and again and again. But I cannot say to a student of arts in London, you should do some chanting. Try the Anattalakkhana Sutta. And even more complicated, when I spoke with my friends and relatives in Germany that are very secular and they didn't even come to the monastery, I came to visit them to find common topics to talk about. I was trying to relate to their chaos of life, to asking questions. So what do you do? Is that and that? And how do you relate to this and that? And how is it in school? And how is it in uni? And do you do sports? And I kept asking all these questions, but there wasn't any common ground there. I noticed that they actually didn't ask back much, because maybe what we're doing is so so special or specified that there is not much overlap. And my suspicion is that people are a bit afraid of anything that looks like commitment to faith or to religion, and they try to live without it. And then there's not much really of the techniques and classical means that one can recommend if somebody then shipwrecks or is about to suffer from that. I've seen this also even in Thailand, like quite sad actually, after so much of our tradition really is inspired by that faith and the common old practices that they do over generations, for example, Katina ceremony or giving alms food in the morning. I fully believe that this can be very grounding and give a lot of refuge for somebody in a turbulent life outside. But the truth is, there's less and less people interested in this kind of activity. They say it's rites and rituals, it's tradition. The Buddha didn't teach traditions, he taught meditation, emptiness, and letting go. And then, okay, one can try. Maybe do it gradually, do it bit by bit. Don't forget the wholesome actions, at least something that maybe you can do that is like, say, looks peaceful and is like soothing and gives you space and so forth. Many times, as a Buddhist monk who doesn't do singing, dancing, and arts and music and literature and so forth, I say, why don't you just play a musical instrument or do some sports? As you know, we actually don't do sports as monks. We even cut that out somehow. We just do a bit of sweeping and maybe walking meditation, but that's too much. But so you find the overlap, what's there as a, say, ritual in a modern society that people can still use in order to step back from that pull of the never-ending trouble that's waiting for them in their life. Or just at least have a sense of peace embellished through a good atmosphere, like with singing, or maybe some kind of good feelings when you're doing jogging and so forth. And we don't have to take it the whole way. We don't have to say, look, the Buddha even said, got to renounce this. Like, we take it gradual. And I believe that's really, really true. The Buddha taught that gradual training. We start bit by bit by doing acts of generosity. We start by practicing sila, respecting each other, and in the way the Buddha explains the worldly right view, he says even like just simply admitting you've got a mother and you've got a father, that's already some, like a very, very significant contribution to well-being in this context where we are. And then to use a gradual teaching and gradual approach and build up the things that we can do on a wholesome level, so they become a reference point, and then gradually see in each situation how much we can actually then penetrate to the truths that the Buddha taught about impermanence, not self, and dukkha, which of course we're very grateful in having heard, because that's the root of everything. The Four Noble Truths. Can't say how much I appreciate that. Not only Luang Por Sumedho, but the whole of the forest tradition, we can say this is our emphasis in the forest tradition, is like talking about dukkha, talking about the cause of dukkha and abandoning of dukkha and the path. So it is, of course, the heart of everything. On the other hand, it's not so easy to really face the things that are dukkha. And all of us actually from time to time struggle with it, I believe. Like when, for example, when mother or father is ill or dies, I know quite a few monks that have been very much shaken by the parting of their parents. And so to say we're beyond and we know all these things, and it's just like in the textbooks that we can let go and not suffer over these things. It's a bit over the top. most of us, I believe, are gradually finding bits and pieces where we can let go of things, people, context, experiences, pleasures, and things like that, without completely falling apart. So for me, the feeling of, grateful for the relative meaning that is installed by practices that we do together in a regular way, in a clear-cut way, using the conventions of our daily life and not abandoning all the deeper things and trying to spot them. And I believe most of us are making experiences in many, many little things that cause a great joy and a great surprise in being able to be uplifted by things that we didn't expect while we were actually following the script book, the textbooks, or the chanting book. And suddenly these things come alive. Suddenly there may be a glimpse of, oh, okay, this is what the Buddha said. this is how it feels. This is like, now I feel actually, ready to move on. Things like that. We might experience that in small steps. And I appreciate very much that our whole tradition has both aspects, the Vinaya and the conventions, the rules and rituals and the tradition, and at the same time, our teachers are never neglecting to point out why we're doing this and what's in store, and if we have built up that understanding bit by bit, how we can then actually face some difficult situations in life and dynamics that otherwise we might get emotional and upset about, or depressed, or downcast. So I believe that it's all in there in the mix. And practically, as I said, I'm a great fan of doing recitation of the teachings. Doesn't mean that I'm attached to the letter of the words, and I'm also a fan of the Vinaya. It doesn't mean that I kind of constantly say the harder or the more black and white the interpretation, the better. It's more the other way around. I try to get to know these things a bit, and then I'm taking great joy in experimenting with it. And I believe that's also actually something, like that's quite modern. It's like that thing where the Buddha says it's like we have to make use of our wisdom. And it's not just about reciting these things in an empty way. There's a lot of that in traditional established religions, and a lot of that needs to be filled with life and meaning and effort and creativity. But I do believe that the Buddha is actually really asking us to do this, because there's so many times he just says the Buddha is just the waypost, the signpost, and you have to do your work by yourself. And so I find that's very modern actually, and it really resonates also with that feeling of, yes, you're being taken serious in your own personal complex life situation. It's almost like somebody says, and you can make sense of that. You can approach it with wisdom. You can approach it with looking at it in a refined and a very, very unbiased way, unemotional. I find that's very inspiring, and very grateful for the framework that we have, and happy to be in various places as long as we're on the same page in terms of the general teachings. And then there is a feeling of not getting confused and drawn away to the chaos of the world, which I think is really a beautiful thing, that in our Sangha, in our monasteries, in the communities, we can cultivate and make much of, and not be ashamed when people think we're actually attached to little rites and rituals. We can prove them otherwise by adding a little bit of a heartfelt energy to it. It's like when, I noticed new rituals here. For example, when going on a walk, the few people that you meet on like a Northumberland walk, are people walking their dogs, and they always ask you, how are you? Hello. Or they always greet you. And you can say it's rites and rituals. And okay, maybe as a monk, usually we wouldn't say hi, hello. But in that sense, like it just means, somebody's got a good ritual here of like connecting and saying hello and being friendly. So we can find things like that where we can open up and just adapting to the situation where we're in and find out what the script is there and try to make sense of the culture, the people that we meet. And as when we meet the people, we have direct contact and we understand what their life is like, I'm pretty sure that there'll be much more exploration that we can do in order to really build a bridge to what we ourselves are doing and how we ourselves are relating to all the difficulties in life. So I'd like to offer this for contemplation for everybody and say thank you for having me. And it's been an interesting experience, a really, truly interesting for me to come here. And I appreciate very much all the hospitality. Ewang.